Let me give you some background. When my family moved to our newly built house, we started hearing noises upstairs which started out as creaks and small bangs, but turned into footsteps and loud bangs and doors slamming. My mom's side is sensitive to ghosts, and it didn't seem to be that until one day I saw a man in all black with a hat and trench coat staring at me from around the corner. I thought it was a ghost at first, but I was about 8 years old and was already used to seeing these types of things and had talked about it before with my mom. One day he was standing there and I asked my mom if she could see him. And she turned and was like, "Oh, yep, there he is. Hey, Fred," to try to make it more lighthearted to my younger sister, who turned around and saw him as well. It became a joke that his name was Fred, and we let him be because he never caused any harm or showed any intent. We continued to see him around and hear his noises until we moved about 4 years later. At the house my family lives in now, I still saw him, but my mom no longer did, and my sister saw him occasionally, but only ever in front of my bedroom door or in my room if it was open and I wasn't in there. At our new house, his feeling changed to me, and it became more and more mean and malevolent, to the point where I freaked out at 3 a.m. and used chopstick to put crosses on the entrance to my room. I was 15, don't judge. At that point, he didn't enter my room, but stood outside my door or in my closet, and I could feel him and his bad energy through it. My sister still reported just seeing him standing there, not bothering her. About 2 years ago is when I read about shadow people, and I think that maybe that's what he is. It's the same figure, never any different kind of person. 2 years ago, I moved out with my fiancé, who I think the shadow man really doesn't like. And I still see him in the 3 different places we've lived, and my sister no longer sees him in my parents' house or anywhere else. I don't specifically believe in God, but my fiancé does, and we have some crosses, which seem to keep the shadow man out of our bedroom, but I can still feel him at the door. Once I leave, I can see him or feel him watching or following me outside. Lately, I've been seeing small shadows when I'm outside and at work, and I'm not sure if that's him trying to trick me into thinking there's an animal and trying to follow it or something, but I just don't know. I don't know if this is even a shadow person or if it's something worse, and for the record, I've never used Ouija boards or anything paranormal that could upset the other side. I have some crystals, and I'm looking into some new ones if that helps, but maybe I should sage the house. I've tried ignoring him, asking him what he needs, and telling him to leave, but nothing works. I don't know who he is, or what he wants. So this encounter happened to me on Tuesday, and I'm only telling this now because it was such a radical experience. I need to review exactly what I experienced in my head, and writing seems to be a good way to do that. For what it's worth, this happened on the night of a full moon as well, and this full moon was so bright I couldn't even get to sleep the entire night since the light was shining through my blinds. That's how bright it was. So anyway, I was just staying awake, trying to fall asleep, and I was just staring towards the corner of my room where my laptop desk is. And I noticed a light under my desk which caught my attention immediately, as I don't have anything reflective over there that should shine in the dark. And the only thing that's over there is the power cable. This light was right on it the whole time. I couldn't figure out why a light would be there in such a concentrated area. Then, like almost immediately, as soon as I was going to get up and check it out, the light rushed towards me. And since it was a full moon that night, I did notice that this light had a dark, misty type substance around it that was darker than my room, without my light on and blind shut, but still very noticeable due to the moon's light illuminating it. I only had my arm out, and it went right up and started circling my head, so I just laid back down, memorizing every detail of this thing as the dark, misty substance was circling my head with that light that I saw earlier in the center of it. It quickly disappeared, but the hair on the back of my arms and neck immediately stood straight up, and stayed that way for most of the night. I knew I wasn't dreaming. I've seen shadow people before in my house, but I've never seen anything like this. A dark mist with a light in the middle? I feel like it was draining power from my laptop. I've caught orbs on tape before in my house, around my electronic devices that are plugged into the wall. Also, another interesting fact is I got tired while watching this thing. Almost like a Sandman type of entity, so I wonder if it was draining my energy too. I wasn't afraid of this thing, really. I was just curious. And if it was a shadow person, they only appear to people out of the corner of their eye and bolt as soon as you take notice of them, making you question what you saw. But this thing had the appearance of a shadow person and light orb at the same time. But it didn't run. I was staring right at it, and it came at me the moment I decided to go check it out. Is this their true form? Does anyone else know what I'm talking about? Maybe that's what they really are, a combination of shadows and light, but we only see them as shadows. I don't know what I saw, but I wish I did. These are two separate experiences that come together into one larger event. One day, I was home with my mom, just hanging out in the living room watching TV. My mom got a phone call and I watched her go upstairs. Like, I literally watched her go up the stairs. A couple of minutes later, I went upstairs to ask her a question, but she wasn't up there. I looked all around the house and eventually found her sitting on the porch, still on the phone. I asked her if she had gone upstairs and she looked at me like I was crazy, and she said that she hadn't been upstairs all day. A couple of weeks later, I was sitting on my bed using my laptop when my mom was getting ready for bed. I looked up and saw my mom standing in my doorway in a white nightgown, and she sleeps in one just like it. Her hair was all messed up. She didn't say anything, she just looked at me, and I looked back down at my laptop, and when I looked back up, she was gone. I thought she had just gone to her room. I heard something in the bathroom, so I went to check it out, and she was right there in front of the mirror, taking off her makeup with her hair still fixed from earlier that day and in her normal clothes. No nightgown. I asked her how she had changed so fast. She looked at me again like I was crazy. About a month later, my parents got in a car accident where the truck they were in flipped 3.5 times, and my mom's side almost got T-boned by a semi-truck. According to some people, what I saw was my mom's doppelganger. And when someone sees a doppelganger, it means something bad is going to happen to the person that the doppelganger looks like. These are the encounters I've had with these shadow-like entities in the past 2 years. To start, I've never done any hallucinogenic drugs or anything of the sort. I'm in the military and it's way too hard to get away with that stuff to begin with, even if I wanted to. From what I can remember, all of this started happening to me when I was stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma for my military job training. Late one night, I was sleeping in my bunk when I suddenly woke up to what looked like a black figure walking into my room. Wiping the sleep out of my eyes, I sat up, thinking that it was one of the guys on fire guard that night taking head count for the sergeant on CQ. Fire guard is just one of the guys that watches over the barracks during the night to make sure no funny business happens. Just as soon as I sat up to greet the guy walking in, it dissipated into nothingness. Really confused, I looked at the top bunk and saw that my bunkmate was up from his phone screen, lighting up the ceiling. I spoke up and said, "Hey Long, did you see someone walk into our room just now?" He paused and looked down from the top of his bunk at me and said, "Nah, man. Fire guard came in like an hour ago. You were knocked out for the night." This time I simply brushed it off and thought it was just a strange encounter and nothing else. Fast forward to January 2018. I started college at the University of North Dakota, UND. This is when the encounters got really bad, to the point where I was too afraid to go to sleep some nights. I lived in a really old dorm building called Squires Hall, way back in the day by myself. The encounters I had didn't all have these shadow people in them, but I'll share what I remember. One night I went to bed and woke up to a tall, shadowy person standing in front of the door of my room with crimson eyes that seemed to stare right through me. I sat up in bed and freaked out. Side note, I don't consider myself a very religious person at all, more like agnostic to clear everything up, so you could imagine my fear seeing these things. After what felt like an eternity, having a staring contest with this entity, I shouted, "What do you want with me?" It took one big step towards me, shook its head, and in a feminine voice it said, "Help." With that, it vanished into the darkness in my room. Another time that really stands out was when it was the end of spring semester, the last week of school. I had most of my room and clothes packed up, and I was ready to move out after my finals were done, and I had a couple of cans of Coke in the back of my mini fridge by the door in my room. One night during that week, I went to bed and woke up to a loud bang. I sat up in my bed and looked towards where the noise came from, my room, towards the door. There, standing in front of my door, was a black figure. It took one step toward me, next to the fridge, and pointed down at it, and then disappeared. I turned on the lamp on my bed and walked over to my fridge, opened it and looked in. There in the back of the fridge, a can of Coke had exploded. An example of the non-shadow people things I see. While I was at UND, I had a long-distance girlfriend over a year. We started dating in high school, and when I enlisted in the military, she started school at the College of St. Scholastica, a private college in Duluth, Minnesota. So at the time that this story begins, we'd been dating for over a year, and everything was great, although she did have a grandfather at the time who was very sick. One night I woke up, and at the foot of my bed I saw 3 figures. On the right, there stood my girlfriend from the past, a little girl with a silly bob haircut and a pink dress from a photo that I once saw of her. In the middle was my girlfriend from the present, long blonde hair, leggings, and a sweatshirt. Then on the left was my girlfriend from the future. She wore a long black dress as dark as the night, with long black hair. Where her face should have been was just a black messy blur, unlike the other figures beside her. Brushing off the incident, I didn't think anything of it, and I didn't tell her what I saw that night. 2 days later, I got a phone call from her crying. She told me that the grandfather that had been so close to her had passed away, and that she wanted to take a break from our relationship to try to figure everything out. After the call ended, I thought back to what I saw that night and analyzed what that third figure might have been trying to tell me. The black dress might have symbolized death, like the clothes you would wear to a funeral, and the blurry black face, meaning she would break our relationship up when she heard about her grandfather's death. Somehow, I had a clairvoyant vision of the near future. Other times I hear people in my room while I'm trying to fall asleep, either people trying to speak to me or talking to someone else in the room. Most of the time, I'll hear people whisper my name in my ear when I'm laying in bed, trying to fall asleep. That summer, I went to see a psychiatrist, just to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. From the sessions I had and the stories I told him, I wasn't schizophrenic, but I was diagnosed with a kind of sleeping disorder. It's called hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. The hypnagogic is falling asleep and the hypnopompic is waking up. Basically, as I'm falling asleep or coming out of sleep, certain parts of my brain either go to sleep or come out of a sleeping state slower and faster than other parts, making me have these visual and auditory hallucinations. Hearing all of this, I still have my doubts. I don't doubt his credibility or anything like that, but I think that there's more to this than just I'm hallucinating. I'd like to hear what other people think, but I really just don't know. First of all, I'll give you a little backstory into my life. Growing up, my grandmother and I would mess around with the paranormal, doing EVPs and such. When I was 13, though, we stopped. My grandma recently started doing it again, and in return, strange things have been happening to me. I work in a nursing home. I've been there for almost a year, and I've never really experienced anything particularly paranormal. I work nights, so there's the occasional creak, but nothing crazy. That was until one evening. I was emptying a catch bag, and the resident's roommate, who was in the hospital at the time, her glass trinket started to make the sound of clanking. I turn around to see the glass trinket fly across the room at me. I calmly walk out, recollect myself, and then go back into the room and pick the object up and put it back where it belongs. Weeks go by and nothing else happens, until one night around 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm sitting at the nurse's station and I hear what sounds like running down the hallway. I jump up and get out of my chair to look down the hall, but nothing. I brush it off as my head playing tricks on me and thought I was suffering from some mild paranoia that night. Well, half an hour goes by, I've calmed down quite a bit, when the attic starts to creak and it sounds like human footsteps are coming from above me. I run down to the other unit to ask if any of the maintenance men have come and are in the attic. They laugh at me and say no, why? And I say, I think someone's up there. The unit nurse tells me that stuff fell out of one of the attic doors, as we have multiple, and one of the items was a mask that you get when you're sick. I then went and looked at every attic door, and they were all closed. There's no ladders leading up to them. I again tried to tell myself that it was all in my head, but to this day I believe someone, alive or dead, was up there. Then one night I was off at home, sleeping, when I recall seeing shadow people walking fast around my room. I don't know if I was awake or asleep, but I felt very much like I was awake and that this was real. They were looking for something. I couldn't move, but I was watching them and thinking, what in the world is going on? Then I was all of a sudden in my grandma's old house, and these shadow people were ripping up the stairs looking for seeds. Then I was in an apartment complex stairwell, and this boy told me to give him my hand, and so I did. He cut into the top section of my finger, and inside me were 3 little white seeds, so he took them. At this point, I woke up, and my finger hurt. I then went back to sleep and saw the shadow people again. One of them, this time, touched my back, and I woke up again, and to my back being cold, and to my surprise, my shirt was raised up in the back, and my skin was exposed. I don't know if what we did when I was younger would make them automatically connect to me. I don't know what this all means, but I hope I don't see them again. I think I was 12 the first time this happened, and the other instances that this happened was when I was in the 8th grade, so 13 or 14. So the first time I was in church because they were celebrating Mother's Day. I had on a red dress and black shoes with my hair down. It was a very short experience, but I saw someone walk through the wall in front of me when I was looking at it. But it wasn't just someone. It looked like me. It had the same red dress and the same black shoes, and it looked like I had walked through the wall. This isn't really related, but once everyone went outside to hit the piñata, I went back inside to get something to drink, and I heard someone laughing. It sounded more like a cackle. I searched to see if anyone was there, but no one was inside the church, so I immediately ran outside. The second time this happened to me was when I was in the 8th grade, and it wasn't just me who saw these spirits, but my brother and dad also. The difference was these spirits were actually shadow people, and not like the first time when I saw the entity in color. Anyway, my dad one day told us that when he was home alone, he saw my brother walk through the second living room door and walk around the living room. Seeing that, my dad immediately thought he was home and thought nothing much of it. An hour or so later, my brother opened the door and walked into the living room, so what my dad saw wasn't my brother. He also told us that when he was home alone again, he was in the kitchen cooking something. When you're in the kitchen, you can see the living room and the living room door in my house. Well, anyway, he was cooking, and he sees me walk through the main living room door. He said I just continued walking down the hallway and disappeared into my room on the left of the hall. I was at school at the time, so this couldn't have been me, and he was home alone at the time. I also saw my dad's shadowy figure. It was in the morning, and I was in my room. I think it was around 6 a.m., so I was getting ready for school at the time. I opened my door and poked my head out to see if my dad was awake yet, because I didn't want him to yell at me for being late. My room is down a long hallway, and it's the last room on the left. The hallway leads straight to the living room and living room door. When I poked my head out, I saw my dad looking through the transparent door as he always does in the morning. I finished getting dressed because I didn't want to get yelled at and started making my way out. I was walking down the hallway fully expecting my dad to be there, but he wasn't. In fact, as I was walking, I heard my dad snoring in his room. His room is across from mine, so I could clearly hear him snoring. There was no one in the living room, so I just left to go to school. My mom didn't see any of this, and we didn't see a shadow figure that looked like her either, but she did tell me that something odd happened minutes after I had left for school that day. My headphones were on her dresser, and they fell down by themselves. And she didn't think much of it and tried to attribute it to something else, but then she heard me yell, "Mom!" repeatedly. Also, I'm not sure if this is related, but my dad died in the same year that we saw all these entities, so could they have been a sign or a bad omen? Are they shadow people or doppelgangers? Both. After he died, he started sort of visiting us and haunting us as well. I don't know what these things were, but I think they bring bad things, and I hope I don't see them again. This began when I was very young. I can't pinpoint exactly how young, but I'd assume the first encounter I remember must be from when I was around 6 years old. Max 8, because we had just moved into a new location. I used to spend most of my time as a kid in our basement watching films from a VHS player. The TV upstairs was always on, being used, and didn't have any player attached. I'd watch films for hours and hours on end, whatever I found in the cabinet. When it finally became dark outside, which I could see from the very thin windows that were above ground in our basement, I would always start feeling uneasy, as if something was watching me. I remember getting very paranoid. The stairway didn't have lights, so of course it got pitch black. I usually went back upstairs when I got too scared or when I saw them. The shadow people, staring at me through the TV screen, standing behind me. Of course, no one ever was there when I turned around. I just saw them when a movie ended or whatever was playing at the time. This happened very often. I guess one would explain this as some sort of child's imagination, and I wouldn't doubt if it was just my imagination back then. I didn't really think about them for a long time when we moved out of that house. I was around 13 when I had my next encounter. I was home alone, doing whatever on my laptop when I heard a bang from the hallway. I instantly thought that my mom must have come home or one of my siblings did, so I went to check. Instead of seeing one of my family members, I saw a tall, shadowy figure in the hallway. It only lasted for a second, but it scared me to the point that I barricaded myself in my room until my real family came home. I didn't see them for another 3 years that I can remember. Well, we moved again before I went to vocational college in another city. In this new house, a pretty similar event to the last one happened. At this point, I was already in vocational college for safety and security. I just came home from the weekend. Again, my family was elsewhere for the day. Not like it was anything out of the ordinary. I was usually home alone at this point. Knowing that my mom took my siblings to the city, when I heard a coin dropping on our kitchen floor, I could only think of one possible scenario: a burglar. Our back door was never locked, and I mean never. Where was the back door? In our kitchen. With that conclusion, knowing the basics of self-defense, I grabbed a pair of scissors in my room and proceeded out of my room to check to see what was going on after listening for a few minutes for footsteps. I first checked the hallway that was further away from the kitchen, seeing those rooms were possible for me to run into if there was someone. I went and finally peeked into the kitchen. No burglar. Just them again. For a second or less, a tall, shadowy figure standing in a reaching position to our cabinet that was open for some reason. It turned its head toward me before disappearing. I stood there in a mild shock for a couple of seconds after the figure was gone. I closed the cabinet, and for the time I was alone. I locked the back door anyway. My next and most recent experience I had with them is from roughly 2 years ago. I had already graduated. In fact, I already worked as a full-time security guard. I lived at home, though. My mom didn't mind it, since she wanted to ensure I could afford living alone when I decided to do so. A similar situation to the previous ones. I'm home alone. How surprising. I was playing on my laptop, and I had a headset on, but I usually kept one ear free in case I heard something in the house, like my mom calling me or someone knocking on my door. While I was playing, I heard clear speech from our kitchen and living room area, so I paused the game and took off my headphones. I could still hear it, but not what they were saying. I didn't recognize the voices either. Again, my first thought was that someone broke in. I sneaked to my door to listen more carefully. The talking had stopped at this point, and now I heard footsteps, clear ones, coming toward my room from the hallway. I didn't want to stay and find out if there was someone at this point. My only option was to rush to my window, open it fully, and jump out. The drop was only around 1.6 meters. Once I got out, I rushed to the front yard. No cars besides the couple that were broken and always near our garage. I stood outside for a long while, looking inside from the windows for any movement around the house. I saw nothing at first. Then I looked at my sister's window, which was a room right next to mine, and would you guess it? I saw two of them staring outside of the window straight at me for what felt like forever before they disappeared. I went back in and checked the entire house afterwards, finding nothing else. I turned 21 this year, and I've been a guard for approximately 2.5. I just moved away from home altogether with my old roommate from vocational college. I don't have any other mental illnesses that have been diagnosed besides depression. I'm not really easily frightened or spooked, and I swear, when I walk into the kitchen during the nights to get something to eat or drink, I still feel them watching me. Even when my room and housemate is at home, I know they are following me, and it's only a matter of time before I see them again. I don't fear them, per se. I don't think they want to harm me. I don't think they want to scare me either. I still feel uneasy, and thinking about them makes me uneasy, especially when I have no clue if I'll ever see them again. This story occurred 2 years ago. I wish I'd recorded it, but I was extremely terrified, thinking someone had broken in, so I was in martial arts mode, prepared to defend myself. I was just playing some games on the weekend, enjoying myself, as usual. Nothing out of the ordinary. By the time it was around 1 to 2 p.m., I was walking toward the kitchen and was just gonna eat the leftover Chinese food until I noticed that my parents' bedroom was open, and the lights in the washroom were on. Then I heard a clink and felt a chill. I didn't bother and went to finish my Chinese food, but then I heard another clank. Then I went to grab my katana, which, mind you, is not legal to wield, but I have it in my care as a family heirloom. I go to my parents' bedroom and I soon start feeling really cold. I check the washroom. My dad's toothbrush cup, which was made of glass, was on the floor on its side, while all the toothbrushes and utensils were still in it. In terms of physics, that's basically impossible. I tried to convince myself that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But then my parents' closet shut really hard, and I ran out calling for my uncle to pick me up to stay at his cottage for a few days until my parents got back. Since then, only shadow people visions in the corner of my eyes. Nothing poltergeist related has ever happened since. I moved to Fairhaven, Michigan when I was about 4. I remember explicitly walking into the big blue house on the corner of a street called Sunnyside with my father. It seemed huge compared to the cramped apartment we had moved away from. This tiny town was located right off Anchor Bay, which is a part of the St. Lawrence Seaway. This means that the land these quaint homes were built on was very old, with more history than my 4-year-old mind could comprehend. Not long after we moved in, after my sister and I were tucked in for the night, we began to hear disembodied whistling. It wasn't scary, eerie whistling, but rather jovial, upbeat whistling. At first we thought it was a neighbor, our parents, somebody else, but after a while we realized that it wasn't. I can vividly recall playing in my room with my sister one morning and watching plainly as one of our toy planes rolled on the carpet across the floor. I can also recall my mother, as I ran to tell her, telling me to quit making up stories, but my sister had seen it too. After that, though, we kept our experiences to ourselves. That's why I've never mentioned the shadow people. My mother always used to shut my door after she put us to bed. That's why when I woke up in the dead of night to see it ajar, I was confused. I sat up, squinting in the darkness to see why my door had been left open, and that was when I saw it. A shadow, rather 2 shadows, distinctly defined, moving towards me. They had no face, no eyes, only the outline of 2 dark people things, moving almost as if they were in slow motion or underwater. I hid under the covers until morning. What's weird is I can remember being on the school bus and casually talking about the shadow people to a fellow classmate. They never really gave me any guff or reacted weirdly. Does that mean that they saw them too? My girlfriend and I moved to a new apartment about 6 months ago. From the first night we moved in, I noticed weird things in the corner of my eye. I see what looks like dark static-like figures in our hallway and bathroom. Sometimes the figures move, but they mostly look like they're standing still. I never see them fully, only out of the corner of my eye. When I turn to look, they vanish. We have a cat and a dog who have both acted strangely when it comes to the bathroom. My dog demands to be with me, and if I don't let him, he freaks out, which is something he's never done before moving here. Additionally, our cat will sit in the dark bathroom for hours, also something that has never happened before. There have been so many times where my dog will start growling or barking at the hall or the bathroom, but I never see anything there. Whatever it is, it usually doesn't do anything physically, except for one time. I had a migraine, so I was sitting in a hot shower with the lights off. Suddenly the cabinet door under the sink opened and then slammed shut. When I looked at it expecting to find the cat or dog, there was nothing. I was alone, and that was several months ago, and that's the only time something physical has ever happened. I told my girlfriend about it, and she agreed that the apartment has a weird vibe that she has not seen, the staticky shadow figures. Does anyone know what they are and what they want? I used to see shadow people when I was younger. My father lives right next to a graveyard, and there's a street from it down towards the house. When I was like 5 to 6 years old, I used to sit on my couch and look out towards the graveyard. I would often see dark figures floating down the street quickly towards our house. Most dark figures would wear a cloak as they floated. I would see them float towards our house at least twice a week. I don't really remember if I told my parents about the dark figures or not. Sometimes I would get scared if I quickly looked out and saw them coming, but sometimes they would just fade and start floating down. Later on, my mother moved into an apartment when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. We had a long hallway leading from the entrance door down to my room. In the hallway, there were doors to other rooms, such as the kitchen, her room, the living room, and the bathroom. After a few years of living in that apartment, I started to see shadow creatures at the corner of my eye. I could see the whole hallway if I just looked a little bit to my side. First, they would appear near the entrance door, but soon, with time, they would move closer and closer to my room, until eventually they would stand by the door and peek into my room as I was sitting there. We have now moved into a newer apartment, and now I'm almost an adult. I've stopped seeing the shadow figures around my dad's house, and I no longer see shadow people in my apartment ever since we moved out, but sometimes as I am in my new room playing video games, I can see in the corner of my eye a cat-looking dark creature walk past me. I used to have a cat when I was 5, but it's long dead. It disappears as soon as I turn my head to look at it. I see it about twice a month. This is my experience with shadow creatures. I just wish I knew what they were. I've seen the shadow people ever since I was little, when I would see them out of the corner of my eye. Then I'd go to look and nothing was there. I do usually see them long enough to make out some features, though. They're either short or tall, or black or gray. I thought it was just a trick of my mind until one night I was staying over at a friend's place. My friend had 2 cats. I was asleep, and all of a sudden I woke up feeling an intense sense of dread. The cat started freaking out and scratching and meowing at the door. I had stayed over at my friend's place before, and the cats never did that. Then I saw a shadow person by the door, and I tried to convince myself it wasn't there and closed my eyes for a second. When I opened them again, the shadow person was standing at the bottom of the bed. This one was completely black. It had no eyes or facial features. It really just looked like a moving shadow. I closed my eyes again, thinking that I was imagining things. And I opened them again. And this time, the shadow person was right over me. At this point, somehow the cats got through the door, even though I thought I had locked it, and chased the shadow person out the window that was above the headboard of the bed. I say chased because I'm not really sure if they scared it or if it just left. As soon as it left, so did the dread that I was feeling. My friend's cats hated me after that, and would always hiss at me when I tried to pet them. Before they left me. I would have considered it as a sleep paralysis episode, even though I've never had one before, except for the cats reacting the way they did. I've never experienced something like that since, but I do see them occasionally. During my senior year of high school, my friend Sean came to visit from another state. His brother and sister-in-law, my best friend Candace, and I were all hanging out when we decided to drive to the local park. It was dark out, around 8 to 9 p.m. At the entrance of the park is the only skate park in town. It is small, and you can see the whole thing and everything in it when you stand in front, because the place is so well lit. There are no trees or shrubs surrounding it, just flat grass, no hills or any other landscape features. As we're driving by the skate park, my friend Candace and I say, "Pull over." We had never seen the skate park busy at this time of night, and there were so many people there. We were curious as to what was going on. We all get out of the car and are standing together at the front edge of the skate park. When we get a closer look, we notice that we don't recognize a single person there. This makes no sense. We're from a super small town where everyone knows everyone. As we're looking for a familiar face, we finally spot one. It's someone from our school, Dan, who was a skater. He was somewhat of a lone wolf, an odd kid with not that many friends. Tall and lanky, he was always easy to recognize because he often wore the same clothes, red shorts and a gray t-shirt. "Oh, hey, there's Dan," I say and point towards him. We're looking at him as he's rising up in the bowl. Our other group members are chit-chatting with someone at the park, not paying attention to what Candace and I are saying. As we see him, we see someone behind him, following him everywhere he goes. We initially thought it was a person, but as he's coming up from the bowl and starts skating around the edge of the skate park towards us, what we thought was a person behind him is a black, upright, morphing shadow shape that's growing taller and wider and getting closer and closer to Dan, until eventually it covers his entire body. And as soon as this thing covers Dan's body, both it and Dan disappear. My friend loses her mind. I had seen a shadow person before, so I was less freaked out than her. She runs up to where Dan was and looks for him, but he was nowhere, just disappeared when we were looking right at him. "Maybe he fell or something," she cried out. Well, there was nowhere he could have fallen that we wouldn't have seen. And we didn't see him fall. One instant he was there and the next he was gone. We didn't talk much on the drive home. We were both in shock. And we never mentioned it to each other again. At school on Monday, I did, however, ask Dan if he was at the skate park last night. He didn't want to answer. "Please, Dan, just tell me." He said yes, but that was all. Still to this day, I have no more answers. I feel like reaching out to him on Facebook or something and sharing the story so I can see what his perspective was, but I guess I'll never know. I have a really awful feeling about this. Lately, my visual snow has been acting up. I've been getting awful ringing in my ears, and I've started seeing the shadow people again. All usually happens before something awful happens, or just when it's over, but tonight was so much worse. I've seen the shadow people since I was little, but today they absolutely lined the roads, in groups. Even my dog growled at them, and he never growls at anything. On my way home, there were entire groups of like 20 of them that I would see running along the side of the car. Tonight also was the first time that I've been physically affected by them. I saw one staring down at me from about 100 feet away while I walked to my car, and I started to get really dizzy and nauseous. After I got home, an incredibly clear one was walking on the sidewalk parallel to mine, and after seeing it I could barely walk straight. I don't know what's going on, but I have a really bad feeling about this. Last night I was having a mini existential crisis, and I really just needed some sort of reassurance, so I asked for a sign, mostly from my grandpa, who passed last year and has been contacting us in various ways since. About an hour and a half later, I woke up to our alarm system going off. Our security monitoring company reported that something in the northeast bedroom had triggered it. That's my bedroom. Our house is close to 5,000 square feet, and they were able to pinpoint the triggering event to my room. Nothing was different last night from any other night. The alarm does not go off randomly. Ever. So, I guess I asked for a sign, and I got one. I was at church today. It's an old, small chapel, mostly old people. I'm the only teenager there. I stopped going after I got sick, but I still pray every day. Now, after I got baptized, I go every Sunday. Today's lesson was about knowing the Word of God and following what He says. I was listening and flipping through my Bible when I heard something whisper in my ear, "Of God." I turned around and no one was there. I looked around and no one was talking. No one ever talks during the lesson. I go back to reading and then I hear it again. "Of God," with some other words that I couldn't quite make out. I looked towards my grandpa to see if anyone was saying anything, but no one was speaking. My grandpa heard it too, but no one else did. Like I said, there's a lot of older people that go to that church, so maybe it was just a past member attending a lesson. Okay, so about a year and a half ago, I woke up in the middle of the night at like 2 or 3 in the morning. I had this feeling of dread or anxiety, and my bed was surrounded by these really tall, really skinny shadow people. I've researched shadow people a bit, and I'm not sure what they are. Can anyone shed some light on what these things are and what they want with me? Last night on Coast to Coast AM, I was listening to them talk about shadow people and the Hat Man. The top hat, the old clothing, the watch. It was all there. Let me explain. I was somewhere around 8 to 10 years old. My bedroom was on the side street, and my house was on the corner. Every time a car would drive by, the lights would hit my closet door through the window. I remember trying to sleep, and I heard a car drive by. And that's when I looked over and saw a black figure walk by the bedroom window outside with a wide-brimmed hat. It scared me to death, but I eventually fell back asleep. Later that night, I woke up randomly for no reason. What I saw was the same guy, but this time he was standing in my doorway. He had a wide-brimmed top hat, trench coat, an old watch, and a briefcase. As soon as I noticed him, all my hairs stood up on end. He turned around slowly and walked through the door across the hall into my sister's room. I haven't thought about this story in over 15 years, but when I heard that episode last night, it triggered me, and I just remembered every single detail. I wonder what he wants. I wonder what he is. The day before yesterday, I was visiting my girlfriend's place for the night. We talked for a while and then watched some movies, and then we fell asleep. I was really tired due to traveling and all that, and I didn't even realize I'd fallen asleep. Suddenly, I felt something on my chest. I was awake now. I tried to move, but I wasn't able to. I tried to shout out, but I realized my voice wasn't coming out of my throat. When I tried to open my eyes, I saw someone on my chest staring at me. It was a black figure with deep red eyes. Finally, I was able to shout in a mumbling way which woke up my girlfriend. I've known about sleep paralysis, but this was something new. Does anybody know what this was? Or what it wants with me? One night I was home alone. I had just gotten out of the shower, and I went to my room and started painting my nails. About 20 minutes later, I heard a woman say, "She's in the bathroom." We've had a woman appear in our house often since we bought it. About 5 minutes after I heard that, I looked up from painting my nails and saw a little face about 3 feet off the ground, looking at me and smiling. All I could see of the face was little black eyes and a little smile. What makes this experience so creepy is knowing that they had been watching me and keeping tabs on me. I wonder what she wanted with me.